Okay, we're just loading everything up here, so we'll be starting in a few minutes. Okay, we're just adjusting a few things. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. If you haven't already, if you would like to log into your Google account, you can do that, and that will allow you to use the chat function. So you can do that now, and then we'll get started in just a couple minutes here. Okay, so it is 7 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. And like I said, we'll pick up people as we go along. So first, I just wanted to say thank you for joining this student organization leadership webinar today. Our topic is officer transition, so we're really excited to have you here and learning more about this. My name is Sammy Bosacki, and I'm one of the assistant directors in the Department of Campus Involvement. I primarily work with our fraternities and sororities and student organizations at St. Cloud State. So here's just a quick quote, but I did want to check in and see how who's here today and make sure everybody can hear me. This is a webinar process and a live webinar right now, but it is being recorded and will be saved to this YouTube account, which is Experience SCSU or SCSU Involvement. Okay. And like I mentioned before, this is being recorded, so you can watch this at any time, which means if you know of other officers that would be interested in this, you can send it to them through this YouTube account or with the link. I did want to point out the chat function on the right side of your screen. This will allow you to type in questions throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to follow up on, feel free to type that in, and I will be kind of looking over at the chat as we go to answer any of those things you have. I did want to mention, as I said a little bit earlier, you will need to be logged in to a Google account to use that chat function. So you can log in now. I would like to kind of go ahead and use that chat function to see who is here today. So if you are an officer of a student organization, if you want to type in the chat which organization you're representing today and then what position you hold within your organization, that would be awesome. So go ahead and type that in the chat now, and then we'll come back. I see there are still some people joining us tonight, which is awesome. If you want to type in the chat which organization you're representing, the name of your organization, and what position you hold, that would be awesome. Then we can kind of go from there. Awesome. I see Randy is here with us. He is the Vice President of Student Government and President of FITA. That's awesome. Okay. So we'll just keep going. And like I mentioned, feel free to ask questions as I go, and we can answer those throughout the webinar today. Okay, so here's an overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. First, why transition? Why is the transition process important, and why should we do that and make that successful for our outgoing and incoming officers? The basics, so kind of talking about what things you should be thinking about as you're going through the transition process, and then some kind of tips and tricks as you're going through that. Also, sharing documents. So what does that look like for your organization? How to share documents? What is helpful to be sharing with your incoming officers? Those kinds of things. Money and finances. So what does that look like for your organization? How does your organization get funding? How do you spend that money? What do you have budgets? All of those types of things. And then how you can make that process easier and more, easier for the new incoming officers to use. Campus resources. So talking a little bit more about the Department of Campus Involvement, and then what we can do to help you in your process of transitioning, but also overall just as student organization leaders. And then we'll be talking a little bit more about transition materials, what are some helpful resources that we have and that you can use in that process. And then, of course, the actual transition process. So what can you do to make this more effective for your outgoing and incoming officers? And then at the end, we'll have time for questions, so you can chat those in and we'll answer anything that you have. So transition. I'm sure you guys have maybe heard of this saying before, why reinvent the wheel? So what this saying refers to is wasting time on things that already exist. So we don't want to leave our organizations without that helpful information, because that's what happens. Then the new leaders have to kind of start over and start from the beginning. So they're kind of taking a couple steps back and trying to figure everything out, where if we do transitioning right, the outgoing officers can kind of hand over that information to the incoming officers and make sure that they don't have to kind of start 3 steps back. They can just kind of pick up right where the outgoing officers have left off. And this is really important because if they have that information right from the beginning, they can kind of take that organization to the next level instead of trying to always kind of backtrack and figure out what they're doing. They can just take it, run with it, and kind of accomplish the goals that the organization is interested in. This also, transitioning also helps new officers feel prepared and confident in their roles, and they won't miss important things that come up. For example, or student organization registration, they'll kind of know when that is, know what they need to do because they've already been given that information. And really, ultimately, it is up to the outgoing officers to make sure that the incoming officers are prepared and have the information to help the whole organization be successful. So now the basics. One of the most important things, I believe, and why I put this as number one in this section of the webinar, is to introduce your new officers to your faculty and staff advisor. This is really important. We want to make sure that our new officers know who our faculty staff advisors of our student organizations are, and vice versa, so that they know, if they weren't at that meeting where new officers were elected, they now know who these new people are and can put the faces to the names and be able to kind of just make that connection. So this is really important to make sure that everyone's kept in the loop when we have new officers for our groups. Making sure that we have a contact list of the new officers and the advisor. Again, kind of just making sure everyone's on the same page and they know who to reach out to, and they have the actual phone numbers, emails, all of that to be able to contact people if needed. Making sure that you register your student organization annually, just so that your organization can stay active at St. Cloud State. But of course, if your organization gets new officers at a different time other than, that beginning of the fall semester, make sure you update that on your roster on Collegiate Link. So that way, any new officers that maybe come in halfway or are, maybe an officer left and you had to do a new re-election, making sure that you update that online so that all of those new officers can be kept in the loop and people that want to contact your organization are able to do that. Of course, giving access and instructions to any online platforms. So making sure that you update your roster on Collegiate Link so that any new officers have access to it and can, update your profile for your organization. And also so that they know how to use that platform. If you have any organization emails, making sure that you pass along those login information and maybe even what you use those emails for and how that process is for your organization. Any social media platforms, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, if you have any of that specifically for your organization, making sure that login information or any, admin roles are passed along to the new officers. Of course, if you have a website or blog, making sure those are passed along so that they can log into those and continue to use them. If you use online document storage, so Collegiate Link has this function, so you can store documents on there. If you have a Dropbox account or a Google Drive or anything like that, again, just making sure that the new officers have access to those so that they can use that instead of trying to find that out afterward. Of course, if your organization is nationally affiliated, making sure that any login information and passwords to that website is passed along too. So here's basics continued. So just reminding, as outgoing officers, reminding to your incoming officers to check their email frequently. It doesn't have to be every single minute, but, a couple times, every other day or so is really important to make sure that if, there's updates coming from our office or, important information that they'll need to know, if it's related to budget or related to, their active status or anything like that, that comes through email. So making sure that they know to look for those things as well. Student organization lockers. So being a registered student organization at St. Cloud State gives you the privilege to have a locker to store items that you may need. So making sure to give new officers that combination and locker number so that they know how and where to get that. Also, if you have time to take them down to the locker room so that they know where it is, that's really helpful too. And of course, they can always come to the Department of Campus Involvement with questions about lockers. Explaining how to reserve rooms and meeting space on campus is really important. I'm sure most of you have done this before and are professionals at it, but maybe some of the new officers have never done that before. So walking them through how to do it, maybe if you have special rooms that you prefer to use, passing that information along. And then any scheduling of room space and reserving of room space can be found at stcloudstate.edu/scheduling. This can take you to all the different ways to reserve spaces on campus. Again, if you're a nationally affiliated organization and you're a local chapter here at St. Cloud State, explaining what that relationship looks like to any national contacts, and then also making sure that your national affiliate knows who the new officers are, so that everyone can kind of be kept in the loop on that as well. And then finally, making sure to finish all correspondence that you have or some things that you are working on, and then kind of pass anything along if it's unfinished. So if you were planning a fundraising event for the beginning of the fall semester, making sure, if you're able to kind of close up those communications, that's really helpful. But if you maybe are kind of in the process of still solidifying some things, making sure that the new officers know that and kind of where you left it off so that they can kind of pick up where you ended, and then that way they can continue with those things and nothing gets lost in that transition process. So next is sharing documents. I always recommend to have both a digital and a hard copy of all documents. Having a digital copy of any documents related to your organization is very helpful because then if the new officers need to edit or change anything, they don't have to retype the whole thing and kind of can just go in and edit that directly from that digital copy. But then also having a hard copy is really helpful. It's kind of that backup, or maybe just to kind of keep record of things. And that way you just have 2 copies of everything. It never hurts, right? Again, just knowing too that any digital copies can be stored on the Documents tab of Collegiate Link. This will make sure that nothing gets lost, and our office can always access Collegiate Link to make sure that that's kind of safe and securely on there for the future. So of course, making sure that you have Constitution and bylaws and making sure that the new officers have those as well. This is probably the most important document of your student organization. So of course, having the most current and most updated version and passing that along, but also if you have previous versions, it's really helpful to pass those along as well so that your new officers can look and reference those if needed. Of course, meeting minutes and agendas, again, kind of that record keeping piece, making sure that, if questions come up, our new officers will be able to look back through those minutes of meetings and kind of say, oh yeah, okay, this is why that happened, or this, amendment was passed because of this, that way it's just all of that record keeping in case they have any questions that come up. Evaluations from programs or events. So if you hosted different events or programs and you kind of did evaluations after those, make sure to pass that along so that our new officers can see what went well with those events, or maybe what didn't go so well, or things that kind of popped up that were surprising, kind of just a way to help them prepare in case they're doing any of those events again. A calendar of events. So not only for things that have happened in the past, but also if you have worked on events that are already kind of in that planning process so that they know, oh, on this date, our organization already talked about having this fundraising event. Or typically in February, we host this type of event on these days. And then that way the new officers can say, oh, last year they did it on this day. Maybe we can try it on a different day, or we should keep it on the same day, or whatever. But again, kind of that record keeping is good reference for new incoming officers. A good thing too, sometimes, people don't realize they even think to pass along officer position descriptions. Just another helpful document to make sure that incoming officers feel fully prepared in their roles and can kind of look to that description to make sure that they're doing all the things that they need to do within their position. And again, of course, now is a good time. It's April, the beginning of April. We still have some time before the summer and maybe before some of our organizations fully transition positions. So if you're looking at these and you say, oh my gosh, we don't have any of these, or I have some saved and some not, this is a really good time to start collecting those and saving them or printing them out and putting them in a binder. So now you can start preparing for that transition process instead of kind of doing it at the last minute or not being able to locate them when you need them. So kind of start thinking about that as we're moving into the final weeks of the semester. So the next section is about money and finances for your organization. So here's just some questions that are kind of helpful for outgoing officers to think about. So where does your organization receive money? Where does that come from? Is it fundraise? Is it through the Senate Finance Committee? Is it from a department on campus? Making sure that your new officers know where that money comes from, or how to apply and where, or how do we collect dues? What does that process look like for us? Do you have any fundraising events planned coming up? What have you done in the past that worked really well that maybe the organization should continue to make sure that you have money to spend for different things that you want to plan for your members? Again, passing along any organization accounts. So our 900 and 334 accounts, so that way our new officers know what that process is like on campus. Our 900 accounts are those fundraising accounts. So those are the ones that you're able to deposit and take out money or spend money out of for different events and things on campus. And then the 334 accounts are when you receive money from the Senate Finance Committee. Any of that funding goes into a 334 account. So it's helpful for the new officers to know what those account numbers are and then how that process works. Does your organization have a budgeting process? Is it a budget that needs to be voted on? How do you manage that budget? Is it like an Excel document that you kind of keep track of? And then how does your organization manage the money? So these are all things to think about if you haven't discussed that already, and then making sure that the new officers know what that process looks like. If you need to approve budgets, is there a certain timeline? Making sure that they're all familiar with that. And then again, kind of what I mentioned already, but making sure that you actually share these documents. Things like if your organization has applied for funding in the past, if you have copies of those applications, that's always good for future reference, so they kind of know what to look at or how that works, or maybe the way that you phrase things, they can kind of access that. If there's any approved budgets that you have currently, that way they know what that looks like. And then maybe just any outstanding budgeting that you have. And next are our campus resources. So DCI is kind of the abbreviation that we sometimes refer to on campus, or you might hear is the Department of Campus Involvement. And we have staff that are happy and willing to help you. So with any student organization question, that making sure that, as an outgoing officer, you can come to us and we can help walk you through some of these things in more detail, and letting your new officers know that we are a resource and we can help with you and your advisor, all of the people involved in your student organization. Making sure that you're familiar and aware of the student organization registration process. This is hosted through our office and our student organization support staff. It is required for all student organizations each fall, and typically we open that at the end of April, coming up in a few weeks, and then it'll be open all summer and then just a couple weeks into the fall semester. So you can kind of keep your eyes open for that. That'll be coming up soon. The Senate Finance Committee, so this is a subcommittee of the student government, but they have an application process for student organizations. So there's a link here on this slide that will get you more information to our website that has kind of more detail about budget and finance in general, but all of the Senate Finance Committee policies and procedures and application are there for reference. So trainings, that is offered. We offer many training opportunities through the Department of Campus Involvement. So make sure to check out our website to see what trainings are coming up. We have a few webinars left and some in-person trainings that will be coming out in the e-blast. So make sure to keep your eyes open. A lot of cool stuff coming up as we wrap up the semester. Main Street and Side Street, if you're unfamiliar, these are our semesterly student involvement fairs. So Main Street happens in the fall and Side Street happens in the spring. So these are really cool opportunities for student organization leaders to register your student organization, have a table so you're able to talk and recruit students or promote events or kind of whatever you would like to share about your organization. So making sure that new incoming officers know to look out for these registration processes because they do have deadlines. So just keeping that in mind. So our e-blast is a biweekly e-newsletter that is sent to all presidents, vice presidents, and treasurers through the Department of Campus Involvement. So this is a really great way to kind of promote any programs or events that you are hosting as student leaders and getting that kind of promoted and out there to other students on campus. And then storage space. So we do have lockers and closets available to registered student organizations. Lockers, student organizations can have up to 2 locker spaces. The locker room is located on the lower level of Atwood Memorial Center. And closets are located in the student organization workroom, but space is extremely limited and there is an application process for that. And typically that comes out in late April as well. So transition material, some things to think about. We recently created a student organization transition guide that goes into a little bit more depth about what we talked about throughout this webinar, but it's a really good way to kind of has different checklists and worksheets, and that's available on the Department of Campus Involvement's website under the Student Organization Resources. So printing that out, filling that out, working through some of those is a really good resource and helpful to the process of your transition. Another really important thing is the Student Organization Guidebook. This is kind of the go-to question problem solving, guide for all student organization. This is a really good way to know if you have questions about certain things. It has information about traveling, about contracts, about really everything related to student organization. So of course, this is located on our website, the Department of Campus Involvement. It is kind of a larger document. I think there's about 40 pages. So you might not want to print that out for all of your new officers, but maybe, saving it to a flash drive to pass along, or providing the link to the new leaders so that they know where to access that if they do have questions. And then, of course, kind of like I mentioned, having that transition binder, so printing out some of those important documents, having your transition guide filled out and put in the front of that binder, and then also making sure that your online documents are kind of gathered in one place and saved for your new leaders. So now, once you have all of this kind of prepared and ready to go, you can start on the actual process of transitioning. So worksheets. So what I mentioned within that transition guide, there's some really awesome worksheets that kind of will help with outgoing and incoming officers. So essentially, at the end of that transition guide, it's a PDF. You'll see that there's a worksheet for incoming officers, which kind of prompts some different discussions, allowing the incoming officer to kind of think through what they really want to get out of their leadership position, what they're looking to accomplish. There's also questions that incoming officers can ask of the outgoing officers, so to really help them kind of prepare for that, and goal setting and timelines and all kinds of things that are included that will help with that actual transition process. Another thing that's really important, and I think is crucial to really successful and effective transitioning, is having some type of in-person retreat or workshop. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It can even just be, let's meet in the lounge of Atwood Memorial Center and we'll pull up, a couple chairs together and just talk through some of these things. Or maybe it's meeting at the House of Pizza or another restaurant just to kind of get some food and kind of bring people together and talk through some of these things, because we've seen it a lot where student leaders just hand over the paperwork and that's it. And then so much gets lost or isn't in there, or you're not able to ask questions. So really, if you're able to plan any type of retreat, if it's a half-day retreat or maybe an overnight thing or workshops or whatever you can do to make sure that outgoing officers can meet with incoming officers, I can't stress that enough, and how important and helpful that truly is to kind of get everybody together, talk it out, and then kind of take it on to the next steps. So as I mentioned, these are included in that officer transition packet, but some of the questions for outgoing officers to kind of think about and collect their thoughts, what did you like most about your position? What did you like least? Was there difficult decisions or, problems that you ran into that were really challenging, and how did you overcome those? And who did you reach out to help you with that? What could I have done to make this experience better? Things that made it easier to complete my responsibilities. What made it difficult to complete my responsibilities, and things I wish I would have known. So in that document, you can answer all of these questions, kind of write in your thoughts, and then that way you can talk through some of these things, and your incoming officers can say, oh, okay, they ran into some issues with, getting food for their event. So knowing from their, learning from the wisdom of the outgoing officers for the new coming people to really jump in and be able to be successful with that. Also, there's a timeline included. So this is a really cool way for officers to look at the year and what they're doing at certain points and what kind of deadlines come up that maybe incoming officers wouldn't realize are important. And then for incoming officers, so as I was mentioning, things like what are some ideas that you want to implement? Do you see any problems that what might arise that would kind of be a challenge to you, and how can you kind of overcome those? What are some goals or events that you really want to do, to maybe try some new things? Or are there things that your organization does that you want to continue, and how can you work on those? And then I really like these 3 questions to kind of bridge the gap between the outgoing and incoming. Things that you should be working on over the summer. If you transition at the end of the spring semester and now you have the whole summer to kind of prepare and gather your thoughts for the fall, what are some things that you should be working on? Or if you do your elections in December before winter break, over winter break you have a couple weeks, what are some things you can work on? Maybe some people that would be really helpful as the new president or as the new treasurer that you should get to know to help you be successful in your role. And then maybe other services on campus that would be helpful for you to reach out to. So things maybe like Chartwell's, our dining service on campus, if you need to do catering for events, or our reservation staff, or anything else that might just be really helpful, and learning from the outgoing officers. Okay, and then so that's kind of the main pieces that we have for the student organization transition actual process. So we do have a couple more leadership webinars coming up. So this one does have a couple of date changes. So let's see. April 4th, we have a social media marketing webinar. So that's tomorrow at 9. And then we actually have a reschedule of the Collegiate Link. Last week, we were supposed to have a Collegiate Link webinar, and that was rescheduled to April 10th at 7 p.m. So that's not on this slide, but just keeping that in mind. And then I mentioned we are having some in-person trainings coming up as well, so you don't want to miss those. So check your email because it was sent in an e-blast. Okay, and then of course, my name again is Sammy Bosacki, and here's my contact information, my email, and my phone number. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have questions anytime throughout the year. That's what we're here for, to make sure that you're successful in your leadership roles, and if there's anything that we can do to help. I do want to just let you guys know I'm going to hang out here for a little bit longer. Feel free to type any questions or follow-up that you have in the chat, and then I can go ahead and answer those for you right now. So yeah, you can just type those in the chat. I'll answer and stick around here for a couple more minutes in case you guys have anything that you would like me to follow up on or go back to. I'd be happy to do that. And as maybe people are thinking of their questions, I just want to say thank you again for joining us tonight. This is a brand new thing that we started, and it's a really cool way to kind of get some information out there to you. And we're really excited to be able to bring these different topics for you and to help you in your effective transitioning, because this is a really important thing, and we're really excited to welcome new leaders into our organization. So feel free to type anything in the chat. And then again, as I mentioned, that Student Organization Officer Transition Guide is available under the Resources tab on the Campus Involvement Student Organization website. So you can download that, print it off, and use that for your transition process. So thank you again. Like I said, I'll be sticking around for a few more minutes. If there's anything that I can do to help, just let me know. do have one question here. It says, in your experience, what do you think is the appropriate length of time an old officer and new officer should spend with the other one transition? A couple 1 hour meetings, one big meeting. That's a good question. I know everyone does it a little bit differently. I've seen organizations that have shadowing like a whole couple of weeks where the new officer shadows the old officers, and that can, like I said, last for 3 to 4 weeks. I've been in organizations where we have an afternoon that we spend a couple hours, the outgoing and the incoming officers, and they spend time, kind of working and brainstorming on their own, and then coming together and kind of passing along that information, meeting with the advisors, meeting with the new officers. So like I said, those meetings, those kind of joint meetings typically last from 3 to 4 to 5 hours in a kind of an afternoon or a morning session. But honestly, I think that, also depending on how much depth or how much training maybe your new officers need, I think even a dinner, maybe an hour and a half where you get some pizza or you get a lunch, grab lunch, and you kind of just talk through some of these things. I think, if you're efficient and effective, I think you can cover everything you need to within that amount of time. I would say no, an hour would be the minimum, would just be my personal recommendation, because there's always a lot. You spend a whole year or more in a leadership position, so you want to make sure you have enough time. But yeah, I think there's so many different ways to do it. Even if you have 2 separate meetings, so that way if you have one meeting where you guys come together maybe for 2 hours, say, talk through some of the things, and then maybe the next week you meet up again, and that way that gives the new officers time to process, look through things, and then they can say, oh, actually, I never asked you about this, or I saw this document, what is that about? It kind of gives them time to look through it all and process it a little bit more. So I think there's no right or wrong answer, but I think if you really allow yourself some good quality time to kind of process through that, that would be my best recommendation for that. Thanks, Randy. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to type them in. I will be hanging out for just a few more minutes. I'll give it 3 more minutes till to get anyone else's questions in, and then we will end this webinar. But like I said, you can watch this at any time. It's going to be recorded on this YouTube channel. we're going to go ahead and end this webinar for today. Thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you at our future trainings. Thanks again. Have a good night.